This is one of the most underrated foods in your fridge because it contains a high concentration of omega-3s, the very important fatty acids, complete protein, vitamin D, vitamin B12, and powerful antioxidants that directly affect your brain function, the health of your blood vessels, your vision, and your energy levels. This food is very rich in selenium and iodine. It supports your thyroid gland, reduces inflammation, and helps your body recover faster. And at the same time, it costs less than most of the superfoods everyone's talking about these days. You've probably already guessed that it's fish. But which kind exactly is the question? Today, we're taking a closer look at one of the simplest, cheapest, and most accessible foods that can radically change your diet. Mackerel is one of the most underrated foods in the diet of a healthy person, a healthy, modern person. We've gotten used to looking for health benefits just about anywhere. In chia seeds, in expensive superfoods, in supplements, in capsules. Some kind of complex nutraceutical supplements, but we often don't notice that the real nutraceutical. Let's put it this way, the potential is literally right there on our plate. At the end of this episode, I'll tell you what doses of omega-3 are important to take, how to choose omega-3 properly, how to pick the right fish, and what you should generally pay attention to when buying omega-3. Now, let's take a look at our fish. Let's not think of mackerel as just some ordinary fish, but as a truly functional food that affects absolutely every process in our bodies. It has a strong effect on the brain, the heart, and, by the way, hormonal balance, especially in women, on inflammation, and even on the aging process. When I mention mackerel, most people, my patients or those attending my webinars or seminars, think of that very smoked fish you find at the store, and they wonder, how could that possibly be good for you? Of course, we're not talking about smoked mackerel here. I'll explain now in what form we should actually be eating it, so that it's as beneficial as possible. Mackerel is considered a fatty type of fish, and that's exactly what makes it so very, very special and unique. It contains an incredible amount of omega-3 fatty acids, even more than other well-known types of fish. It's the omega-3 acids, a group of polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs. They're also called the perfect food for the fastest, let's say, the fastest organs in our body, mainly for the brain and the heart. So it's those very acids, the natural omega-3 acids found in mackerel and other fatty fish, that actually make the blood thinner. That is, people often have a tendency towards blood clotting in their coagulation tests, meaning their blood can, roughly speaking, thicken quickly. So it's specifically omega-3 that makes the blood thinner, and it's omega-3 that, so to speak, keeps the heart beating, in a figurative sense, quickly and rhythmically, and helps the brain work clearly. And the eyes, by the way, are also an important organ, to see sharply and to adjust to the dark. That's a function of omega-3. There are a total of 11 omega-3 fatty acids, but the three most important ones are the well-known ones: alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA, eicosapentaenoic acid, or EPA, and docosahexaenoic acid, or DHA. By the way, everyone tends to think that omega-3 fatty acids come from salmon, or expensive trout, or also expensive Atlantic salmon. But actually, if you calculate it in terms of omega-3 fatty acids, mackerel comes out on top. It's much cheaper and, in fact, is more beneficial for our diet, and by the way, is also more familiar to our Russian diet. The content of DHA, EPA, and ALA varies in different fatty acids, and the DHA content is more important for the brain and vision, whereas, for example, the EPA content is more important for the cardiovascular system and for reducing inflammation. You might sometimes notice on the packaging that, for example, children's omega-3 contains more DHA. For example, perinatal or prenatal omega-3 for pregnant women, or those planning a pregnancy, also contains more DHA. Omega-3 for older patients contains more EPA. This is specifically due to the way it affects our bodies. That's how they're differentiated. So how can we tell if we have an omega-3 deficiency in our bodies? It's always dull hair and always lifeless, brittle nails. It's any kind of skin problem, especially inflammatory ones: acne, dermatitis, eczema, psoriasis. There's even a well-known protocol for treating psoriasis where they use very high doses. Omega-3. I can't say I'm for it, but omega-3 certainly has a proven effect on inflammatory. In skin diseases, it suppresses inflammation very well and works specifically on the skin. Also, we can also understand that there is little omega-3 in the body. Dandruff is seborrheic, that is, when the scalp is very dry. In general, any dryness of the skin, dryness, flaking of the skin, peeling, dry heels, cracked heels, and getting tired quickly. Very pronounced muscle weakness, eye fatigue, a sudden drop in vision, yes, just like that, without any obvious reason, frequent colds, and low endurance during workouts. Why do we need omega-3 in the body? Simply put, omega-3 fatty acids are a component of absolutely every cell. They ensure the integrity and protection of our cells. It's like a shell that protects the cells, absolutely all the cells in our body, from various toxic impacts from both outside and inside. Omega-3 also has the ability to stimulate metabolism and provide energy to tissues. It's specifically omega-3 that works with inflammation in the body. For example, if you have any kind of autoimmune inflammation, or, I don't know, like gastritis, pancreatitis, cholecystitis, any inflammation, whether chronic or acute, it doesn't matter. So omega-3 suppresses this inflammation, but many people confuse these concepts and end up buying. At the pharmacy, you see omega-3, 6, and 9. People think that these also work with inflammation, but actually they don't. Only omega-3 works with inflammation in our body. And it's really important to keep this in mind when we're choosing an omega supplement. Omega-3, 6, and 9 are, in fact, not just ineffective, but can even be a toxic form of nutraceuticals, because we already get enough 6 and 9 from our food. There's no point in taking 6 and 9 as a nutraceutical supplement. It's even toxic and dangerous. But omega-3 is something we're always lacking because we just don't eat enough of it. 2 kilograms of wild fish a day, and so on. What else does omega-3 do? It really does normalize blood vessel permeability and genuinely helps with blood thinning therapy. For example, if we have a patient who is taking blood thinning medications, it's important to keep in mind that omega-3 can make the blood even thinner. Omega-3 really does prevent cholesterol buildup, meaning it helps stop the formation of atherosclerotic plaques. Omega-3 fatty acids reduce the breakdown of collagen. That's why we say omega-3 is very important for the skin. If you start taking omega-3, if you take it in the right dose and on a daily basis, you can actually see results on your face in 2 or 3 months. That's because omega-3 helps your body produce its own collagen and reduces its breakdown. By the way, omega-3 also slows down the onset of aging. This works through inflammation, through the ultraviolet response, because omega-3 fatty acids are also a very powerful antioxidant. So, what am I getting at? Mackerel is actually one of the top sources of omega-3, not omega-6, not omega-9, but omega-3 fatty acids. In 100 grams of fish, raw fish, there are between 2 and 4 grams of omega-3. When we talk about omega-3, what matters to us is this. In this case, EPA and DHA, eicosapentaenoic and docosahexaenoic acids. So, from 2 to 4 grams of omega-3. Of course, besides mackerel, other fish that are very rich in omega-3 fatty acids include herring, anchovies, coho salmon, capelin, sardines, tuna, trout, red mullet, and others, not just, as we've already mentioned, salmon and Atlantic salmon. So don't be afraid to include fatty fish in your diet. Obviously, probably not on a daily basis, but once or twice a week. That would be really great, and of course, the method of preparation is very important here. We're not talking about frying it in oil. It's already fatty enough, but some people still fry it in oil. We're talking about baking, steaming, sous vide, or any other way you like. Or, for example, if 2 or 3 times a week you include herring or mackerel, or really almost any fish, especially sea fish, you'll be getting your omega-3s. This will be incredibly beneficial for our health. If you don't have allergic reactions, if you don't have any autoimmune diseases where, for example, we have to avoid certain things, fish or, say, individual reactions and intolerances. There are people who don't like fish. There are people who just can't stand it, don't like it, and won't eat it in any form. Yeah, for all sorts of reasons. Some just don't like it, for some it's too expensive or not available, and some are afraid of parasites. That's a valid concern with fish, by the way. In that case, you absolutely must include omega-3 supplements in your diet, and the daily dose of omega-3 and EPA plus DHA. You look at the bottle, turn it around, and check the contents. Specifically, look for eicosapentaenoic acid, EPA, and docosahexaenoic acid, DHA. Together, they should add up to at least 1,000. And make sure to check how many capsules are in a single dose. Sometimes the bottle says omega-3 1,000 or even 1,500, but that's for 6 capsules. Well, obviously that's not okay, because if you need 6 omega capsules, plus vitamin D, plus magnesium, we'd end up spending all day just taking these capsules. You get about 1,000 milligrams in a dose of 2 capsules, no more than that. 3 at most. This is a bit of a controversial question. Why do we even need supplements, and in this case, specifically omega-3? Why take nutraceuticals if we can just eat fish and generally feel great? Yes, absolutely, if the fish is good quality, if it's wild, if it's not infected with various parasites, and doesn't contain a lot of toxic metals. You need to eat a lot of fish every day, and so on. That's not always possible in everyday life, even for someone who is very careful about their health and diet. Check the EPA/DHA content and the dosage. And make sure to choose a product with at least 1,000 milligrams per serving. That's very important. So choose any omega-3 with a good composition, a solid dosage, and make sure it contains vitamin E to protect the omega-3 fatty acids from oxidation. I also want to point out that a lot of patients, I see this during my appointments, I really do. In the comments as well, I notice that many patients are taking omega-3 incorrectly, and as a result, all the benefits just go to waste. Even if it's a really expensive omega, and by the way, there are some brands that are truly pricey. Some are very expensive, very high quality, and there's actually a big difference in price. But in reality, it doesn't matter how much the supplement costs. What matters is how you take it. What mistakes do patients make? They take omega-3 capsules with water. That's not correct because these are fatty acids. They're only absorbed when taken with fats. So the right way to take omega-3 is in the morning, during or after breakfast, and that breakfast must include fats. Oil, avocado, nuts, anything like that. So after a breakfast with fats is the ideal time to take omega-3. Another mistake is taking omega-3 in the wrong dosage, less than 1,000 milligrams, or in the wrong form, as I mentioned earlier. When choosing omega-3, pay special attention to the presence of vitamin E in the formula for its antioxidant properties. And also, when taking omega-3, I've already mentioned this today, don't choose 3, 6, 9. Because we actually get enough 6 and 9 from our food. We don't need to take them as an extra supplement. Don't take omega-3 together with iron in a single dose. The same goes for chromium, calcium, magnesium, copper, and selenium. If you're taking any of these supplements, just space them out throughout the day and take them separately. Or at the very least, wait an hour between them. Omega-3 goes well with all fat-soluble vitamins. As I already mentioned, vitamin D. This also includes vitamins A, E, and K. You can take it with the vitamins coenzyme Q10, collagen, and lecithin. What other sources of omega-3 do we know? Seafood, if you tolerate it, caviar, which is very rich in omega-3, squid, oysters, mussels, shellfish, and cod liver, which contains a lot as well. Omega-3 is also found in flax seeds. Overall, since it has many contraindications, you need to be careful with it because, for example, if you have hypothyroidism or certain other contraindications, flax is not allowed. But flax really does contain omega-3. It shouldn't be taken if you have acute gastrointestinal diseases. For example, cholecystitis, pancreatitis, colitis, allergies, as well as various hormone-dependent tumors. You need to be careful with these conditions. Omega-3 is also found in walnuts, chia seeds, and various seaweeds like kelp and sea cabbage. But we must always remember, animal-based omega-3, like the omega-3 from fish, is absorbed much better than from plant sources. Alpha-linolenic acid is barely converted into eicosapentaenoic and docosahexaenoic acids. So, if you suddenly have an intolerance to fish, or an allergy to omega-3 fatty acids specifically of animal origin, you can substitute with plant-based sources, but keep in mind that it's a slightly different form. If someone has a pronounced omega-3 deficiency, and nowadays, this is actually quite common. It's because there's a lot of omega-6 in our diet, and as a result, the body starts to function in a state of chronic inflammation. That's exactly why we add omega-3 from external sources, either by eating fish or taking omega-6 nutraceuticals. If we also take omega-3, 6, 9 nutraceuticals, we're actually increasing inflammation in our bodies. What's interesting is that because of the excess omega-6 in our diet, the body starts to function in a state of chronic inflammation. And this doesn't always show up as obvious symptoms or pain. But at the cellular level, accelerated aging is triggered specifically due to a lack of omega-3, because omega-6, roughly speaking, suppresses omega-3. That's exactly why mackerel isn't just a food product. It's real functional food that acts as gentle daily support against inflammation. When we talk about omega-3 capsules, we're obviously talking about a concentrated product that's convenient, dosed, and standardized. For example, in my own practice for my patients, I've been using omega-3 for many years, I think more than 10 years now, already as a basic internal support, especially for people with high levels of stress, sleep disorders, and skin problems, with cardiovascular diseases. If this is an elderly person with either incipient or ongoing atherosclerosis, we prescribe fairly large dosages. If this is a person taking statins, for example, or has hypertension or some kind of cardiological case. In the past, we also gave fairly high doses of omega-3, the best nutraceutical, the fanciest one in a bottle, whether it's omega-3 or something else, will never replace a proper diet. And in this sense, mackerel is a perfect example of a natural source that you can include in your diet. No complicated plans needed. At the same time, it contains not only omega-3s, but also high doses of vitamin D, vitamin B12, phosphorus, and is a great source of animal protein. There's quite a lot of vitamin D in 100 grams of mackerel, 6 to 8 to 10 micrograms of vitamin D. That's about 60 to 70% of the daily requirement. And honestly, it's one of the few dietary sources of vitamin D, which affects immunity and hormones, and contains not only omega-3s, but also a great dose of vitamin D. Vitamin D plus omega-3 equals synergy, reduced inflammation, and support for our brain. There are about 10 micrograms of B12 in 100 grams of mackerel. That's also 300% of the daily value, 400% of the daily requirement, and B12 means energy and vitality. The nervous system, its prevention of anemia, prevention of aging, and supports cognitive function. A lack of B12 leads to fatigue, brain fog, and anxiety. That's why mackerel, which is so rich in micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals, and so affordable, also contains an interesting precursor to acetylcholine. It's called choline. Choline is exactly the substance that's all about memory, concentration, and speed of thinking. It's that very element, that very nutrient, which affects mental clarity. Mackerel and any fatty fish, by the way, also contain coenzyme Q10. And coenzyme Q10 is all about mitochondrial energy, anti-aging, and heart health again. And having all of that in one product. Omega-3 plus Q10 provides excellent support for the cardiovascular system and for energy as well. Mackerel is also rich in selenium, which is critically important for our body's antioxidant protection, because when there isn't enough selenium, the body, among other things, it becomes less able to cope with oxidative stress. Tissues start to grow where they shouldn't, and various new growths can appear. And the thyroid gland is especially sensitive in this regard, because without selenium, the thyroid simply doesn't function at all. At least, not the way we need it to. No selenium means no protection for the thyroid gland. Selenium as well, it activates some interesting enzymes called selenoproteins. For example, there's glutathione peroxidase, an interesting name, which protects liver cells from being destroyed. And in fact, selenium is the fuel for thyroid hormones, because without selenium, the main hormone T3 doesn't get activated, and proper thyroid function is really important. We've talked about this many times before. It helps reduce fatigue, lose weight, and improve PMS symptoms. And not many people know this, but selenium, specifically selenium, protects the thyroid from various negative effects. By the way, the form is very important. Of selenium, if you're taking it as a supplement, it should be selenium methionine. Or in general, again, we eat mackerel, prepare it properly, and we get selenium, omega-3, vitamin D, coenzyme, and so on. As for mackerel, despite its high fat content, it contains healthy fats that don't have carbohydrates, are easily absorbed, and there's no need to be afraid of it. So when we say fatty fish, oh, I'll gain weight, we actually gain weight, as we've discussed many times, from carbohydrates and from the improper distribution of nutrients in our food. So there's really no need to be afraid of these particular fats. They're actually good for you. They're well absorbed, especially when boiled or steamed. Cooked mackerel is great for diets and for weight loss, and the fats in mackerel help you feel full. The protein content is very high, almost 19 grams per 100 grams. It's animal protein, which provides the building blocks for muscles and for cell repair. If we're talking about calories, mackerel contains about 200 to 250 kilocalories per 100 grams, depending on the type. How many times a week can you eat it? You can and should. 2 to 3 times a week, about 100 to 150 grams each time. So again, there's no need for huge plates of it. 100 to 150 grams, that would be excellent. The best time is lunch or dinner, combined with fiber, for example, with some kind of salad, with any type of fiber, especially if you're trying to lose weight. In that case, it should be fish and fiber, again in the form of a salad, and no complex carbs for dinner. If you're not trying to lose weight, then you can add complex carbs to your dinner, anything like buckwheat or whatever you like. Another interesting point, Atlantic and Pacific mackerel are safer than many predatory fish. So when it comes to heavy metals, mackerel actually has a low mercury level compared to tuna. Compared to swordfish, which are loaded with toxic heavy metals, mackerel has a relatively short life cycle. And this whole nutritional profile really makes it a super lean, superfood that supports your nervous system, immunity, hormone balance, and energy metabolism all at once. And if you look deeper, omega-3s and mackerel are involved in the synthesis of special substances called eicosanoids. These are the very compounds that regulate inflammation in our bodies. Simply put, they help the body switch from a state of inflammation and defense to a state of recovery and balance. That's exactly why people who regularly eat the right fatty fish tend to have lower levels of systemic inflammation. And the indicators, the markers of various cardiovascular diseases, they're also much better. It's also really important to mention the brain separately. DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, is a structural component of neurons and is part of omega-3s. It affects the speed of signal transmission, memory, concentration, and emotional stability. That's why mackerel isn't just food for your body, but also nourishment for your brain and your nervous system. If you're feeling chronically tired, have brain fog, or notice your concentration slipping, it's often not just stress to blame. It can also be due to a lack of the building blocks your brain needs. Our brains are made up almost entirely of fat, so omega-3s are really important here. And remember, at the core, it always comes down to nutrition, lifestyle, physical activity, and sleep. Only after that come the best, top-quality nutraceuticals, which also need to be chosen wisely and thoughtfully. Sometimes, being healthy is simply about making the right choices with simple and affordable things, getting the most benefit, again, from a product if you boil or bake it instead of smoking it. That's exactly why, if you have certain knowledge, you can put together a diet that's quite affordable and inexpensive using really great products.